Alrighty, good afternoon and welcome back. Just before we begin, the overall plan for today's tutorial is to go over assignment 3, which I just finished mostly. 1 minute ago, I noticed there's a problem in the PDF that I just need to go and fix before I post it online, but it's going to be found under the assignments folder. And we're going to go over the types of questions today. It's quicker than the last few, so you should be able to get through them pretty quickly. Just before I begin, there is a question in the chat asking, for graded quizzes, aren't we supposed to get 2 attempts? And the answer is no. So that was, I think there was one quiz where I allowed 2 attempts. There might have been a second one. Those were exceptions. That was never the sort of overall plan for the quizzes. Those were just exceptions for 1 or 2 of the quizzes. The normal way is to just have the one quiz, and then you get the mark there. That's why there's the unlimited practice quizzes, which draw from a different pool of questions, but they test the same material so that you can get some practice. And then there's like, here's your test that actually assesses you. So remember, the lowest one does get dropped though. So if there's one that doesn't go very well, your lowest quiz will get dropped. I realize I should turn on my transcript. There we go. So that'll help out. Aside from that, has anyone been able to see their answer keys from the graded quizzes? And I'd look at chat to see if someone has recently looked and been able to find them. So, okay, what I'm going to do, I have not had the time, but I'm hoping this week to have the time. I want you to be able to see where every mark comes from and to understand where every mark comes from. Since you aren't doing repeats of it anyway, you don't need the previous answers to study for anything, but you do want to be able to see that your answers are correct, that your marks are legitimate. So I'm going to really make it my goal to troubleshoot that and figure out what is going on this week. They do not have any settings that make any sense on Connect where I can make it so that you can see the answers. According to my settings, you can see the answers, but because I can't simulate myself as being a student, I'm unable to go through and see what you see, unfortunately. I get a modified student view, which doesn't actually behave like a student view. So I might need to email them to figure out if this is possible, and if not, why it's not working. If in the end, for whatever reason, I cannot make it so you can see the correct answers, as painful as this is for me, we'll set it up so you can book an appointment and I can painstakingly go through them with you one by one, because it is your right to be able to see why you're getting marked the way you are getting marked. I am super crossing my fingers and hoping it doesn't come to that, because that's an enormous amount of time, especially considering it should just give you the answer key. That's the current setting. So let me look into that and I'll see what's going on there and hopefully try to help there. So before I talk about the assignment, let me switch my screen over to, I just need to hide a couple windows that I don't accidentally want to open up, such as my email and my, oh, that's my personal financial information and my email. I have like 30 tabs open at any given time, so I just got to double check everything. Here we go. Let me switch my screen over to our website. Yeah, a couple people have completed it, but don't see answers. I don't know why it's doing that. For any quiz that has not become due yet, you won't be able to see the answers until the due date, but you should be able to see the answers for any real quiz that was already done. The weird thing is the practice quizzes work. They behave as they should. You can see the answers after they're done. But for the graded quizzes, it's not working despite having almost identical settings. So I got to see what is broken with Connect. And it's frustrating because it should be working. It's set up so it should be working. I'm not a person that, freaks out when I'm using technology. I'm very comfortable with technology, but it just is not comfortable with me, at least this time around. Okay, so on our website, let me go into the student view. As I mentioned, Assignment 3 will be posted shortly after this class. I need to fix something, but the previous 2 assignments were relatively long. This assignment is shorter. It can be done in a shorter amount of time, but when you see it, it looks like it's bigger. The reason for that is I just gave a lot more space to write answers this time around, so it filled up pages. I'm going to show it to you right away. It will be here at the end of the class. I just have to fix the PDF that's broken. And I'm going to make it due, let's make it due 2 weeks from now on December 8th. So that'll give you a little bit of time to get that assignment done. So you have lots of time. I think I said something last week. If last week I said a different due date, I'll change it to that. But for now, I'm planning 2 weeks, unless I look at the recording and it says this is due on whatever date. I think I might have said that. I'm going to choose whichever one is the later date. And I'll confirm over announcement, but you have at least 2 weeks to get this done. So lots of time, and I'm going to show you what it is right away. So the other thing I wanted to say just before I do that is just to take a look where we are. And before we do that, just as a reminder, because final exam time is coming up, which in our class means later between this week and next week, I'm going to post our, this is a chemistry. Let me open ours. I'm looking at my chemistry course. Our class doesn't have a formal final exam, but it has a final assessment. And as I mentioned, I'm setting this up to be like a letter that you're either writing to yourself or to a friend to convince them that physical fitness is important, and it's going to be drawing from stuff from the course. And I'm going to get that finalized this week so that we can talk about it next week. And you don't have a scheduled final exam. It's going to be writing that letter and handing it in the last week of class as your final exam. So because you can plan it and you can study and work on it on your own time, you can find time between your other exams and you can ensure you do well on it, just in case you need to study for other exams that are like a main focus of your program. More details will be posted later this week, and then we can discuss it in our next tutorial meeting. Where we currently are in the course, I'm scrolling down, is over here, week 11. Now, I'm going to get the notes for stress and sleep, muscular endurance up in the next few days, as well as a recording. I've been finally getting through those recordings and posting them at least a couple days before the quiz. But remember, it's not covering anything that isn't in the textbook. So as long as you read the textbook, you are good. But if I don't get these recordings up soon, I will add a few extra days for quiz 5, the same way that I did for the other quiz, so that you have a little bit of time. This was kind of like a crunch week for me. It's been very busy, but it's been busy the whole term. I'm sure you're experiencing that as well. But you'll notice that we also have a reflection, and I'm going to get that reflection posted next week. And it's going to be a shorter thing as well. I'm making sure that it's not going to be, a burden to your mental health and stress, which is what this reflection will be on. I don't have that done yet, but it will get posted. This schedule was a tentative schedule. And because of the way that the courses worked out, we fell a little bit behind it, and that's okay. So for this week, the only things you have to worry about are this assignment, which I'm going to discuss, and quiz 5, which may be pushed back a day or two, depending on when I get these recordings posted. So for now, those are the only 2 things on your radar, so you don't have to worry too much more. But then we have next week, 1 more week, and then the last half week of classes. So we're getting towards the end, and we'll make sure that we can finish it all on time. This final assessment, as I said, will be posted sometime within the week, so you can already get started working on it from week 12 on and just hand it in without any problem. Now, before I move on to talking about the assignment, I don't have a poll set up, but let me just quickly make a poll. And the poll is going to be the usual poll. Let me just say any quick questions, and it's going to be yes, microphone, yes, chat, and no. And we'll just call it quick questions. Quick questions. Save, launch. I really need to figure out if it even is possible to save that poll because it's super annoying retyping it literally for every class I do. So that's any questions about what's happening in the course so far. If not, I'll move on to talking about assignment 3 now that it's mostly finalized, except for the broken part of the PDF I just discovered. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's any major questions unless someone is in the process of typing one, in which case, once you hit enter, I will answer it anyway. So let me switch gears now. I'm going to talk a little bit about assignment 3. I went over it briefly last time, but now it's completed, so I can go over each question with you so you know what you're going to be answering. And just like assignment 1, I set it up to be a fillable PDF. Now, when I go through it, initially it's going to look like there's a lot there. So let's just take a little look. There's a few questions here with a lot of space, but for each of these, you can get away with writing relatively short sentences, and it's just giving you extra space so that you have the room should you need it. And there's a couple fill in the blanks. A few more questions. These are all stuff that we've discussed. For instance, what is meant by 1 rep maximum? A quick little answer here will do. What is a target BMI range? We talked about that already, and it's just a range of BMI. What are 2 limitations or flaws? Your textbook directly talks about this. So all of these are straightforward. And these will be straightforward as well. I'm going to talk about them in detail, don't worry. As I mentioned last time, talking about some of our goals, I realize I have to edit this to say long-term goal, but I will do that. And rewards. This section looks really long, but that's just because I only had this one question on the page when realistically you're going to fill out like maybe a few centimeters of this, but I gave you the room if you wanted. There's the table that we discussed, and this is where my PDF is broken, where everything automatically gets checked. So I'm going to fix that before this is posted. I'm also going to align these squares because the fact that they're kind of jiggly bothers me. And then 3 more short questions. These are worth 2 marks. So the amount of space given is way more than is needed to end it off. We're going to look at each of these. In total, it says it's out of 60 marks, which sounds like a lot, but each of these things is quick. And I said that for the other ones, but I promise you, this is quick. So I'm getting a private question, which I'm going to respond to. The question is whether I can make quiz 5 due 1 week later. I might be able to do that, but my concern then is all the stuff gets crunched at the end, but it might give you the option in order to schedule it as you need, which means that if I move that back, the other quizzes won't change their due dates, but it means that you could get it done quick if you needed to, or you could take the extra week. So I will almost certainly move it back at least a couple of days, maybe until the Friday, which will give you another 4 or 5 days, which will help out, I think. But I don't want to, cram too many things into the last 2 weeks and say, oh, and here's the other 6 assignments that are due this week. So I want to make sure that we steadily progress, but I will push it back a little bit to be a little bit more manageable. The last few reflections and this assignment are quicker. Let's go over this assignment in a little bit more detail. Just like I did for assignment 1, I've estimated the amount of work, and this is kind of the upper limit. For instance, this says about 10 meters, I've been thinking about meters too much, 10 minutes of work. And the questions are, what are 2 reasons that reducing sedentary time, in other words, time doing nothing, are important? What are 2 examples of tools or devices that you could use to help monitor your progress? And what are the benefits of having a fitness buddy, someone that could read over your plan and kind of keep an eye on you? I might increase this to 15 minutes as kind of an estimate of the work, but These are all short. They can be answered in 2 or 3 sentences in most of the cases. Same thing with this table. This table is basically saying, like we talked about jogging, going through checking that this would be cardiorespiratory endurance and muscular endurance. If I do this right now, I'll zoom in a little bit. My PDF is broken and it does this. I have to go and individually rename every one of the thousands of boxes, but that's okay. I'll do it. It's my job. But once I have that fixed, you're just checking them and you're saying intensity. I want my, for example, heart rate, let's say 160 BPM or some sort of a specific. I obviously have to fix how that wraps as well. It's just formatting stuff. And we'll say 30 minutes. So going through this and filling out the table, I did the first row in seconds. If you kind of have a plan, you can go through this, and I've tentatively said 20 minutes of work, and I think that's roughly about correct. Maybe I'll make it 30 just so that I'm being more honest on the upper end of the work. Same thing with the other sections, 10 minutes of work. This is literally 3 sentences. Well, not 3 sentences, maybe 6 sentences, but about 10 minutes of work to answer this. What kind of changes to your daily routine can you make? So I've been given estimated times on how much you should spend, and in total, it's less than 2 hours. But realistically, more people will finish this in about an hour and a half to 1 hour. I've said that for the other ones. This time, honestly, once you read the questions, they're short. It's not long. And having 1 to 2 hours for 10 marks in a course is really efficient. Normally, to get 10 marks in a course, you'd have an assignment that might be, 4 to 6 hours of work. This is, trust me, short overall. Trust me, I say. So let's look at this in a little bit of detail. Part 1 is all about identifying our fit goals. And the first question, in your own words, what is the fit principle? So we know that fit is standing for the frequency, intensity, type, and time. And you want to tell me a little bit about what those are and why they're important to a fitness program. So that's talked about in every one of the chapters. It's first introduced in chapter 2, where they go over the concept in general. For question 2, it's identifying your heart rate, your target heart rate zone. And we went through an example of this, where you take your age subtracted from 220 to get the maximum heart rate. Then you just multiply that number by 0.65 and 0.90 to get your 65% and 90% heart rate, which is the target heart rate zone. And it's going to give you a target you can use for that table when you wanted to say, what is my target intensity? Well, around 150 BPM or whatever your value ends up being. Question 3. Notice I also give the sections. Section 3.4, developing a cardiorespiratory endurance program. What is the recommended duration per session and frequency per week for this type of exercise? So in chapter 3.4, we talk a little bit about how often you should do cardiorespiratory endurance and what type of intensity. And if you look at the previous question, the intensity is kind of standing right there looking at you, and the frequency is discussed in that chapter as well. So that's what I mean. These are kind of shorter, punchier answers, and in many cases, I tell you the chapter where you can find that information. Feel free to type a chat if you have any questions. You can feel free to interrupt me at any time, and I'll try to answer it. Otherwise, I'll keep going through and looking at each of these questions. Question 4. What is meant by the term 1 rep maximum? Now, I was originally going to have you estimate your 1 rep maximum, but I realized there's no way I can do that without having you actually go out and do a ton of exercising. I was thinking, can they estimate it by seeing objects around the house that are heavy? And then I just imagined a student, picking something up that they shouldn't pick up, falling down on their butt and hurting their arm. And then I realized, wow, that doesn't sound like a great idea for me to require it. So I just want a description of what a 1 rep maximum is. If you know your 1 rep maximum, there's a lab that discusses how to assess that. You can talk about that. You can use that as your intensity goal for any of the muscular strength or muscular endurance exercises you're planning in your schedule. But for the rest of us, we can just talk about what a 1 rep maximum is and be aware that it could incorporate into a fitness plan. So a short, punchy answer here. What is the target BMI for a physically fit person? Well, many of you already know this, but you can go to the chapter 6.2 and you're just identifying what the target BMI is. Remember, we discussed that there's a lot of flaws with BMI. BMI isn't a perfect measure. So the next question, what are 2 limitations or flaws of using BMI? The reason I have BMI here is because you might be setting a particular target BMI as your goal for your fitness program. So you might want to talk about it, and this is having you think about that BMI. So what are 2 limitations or flaws? Again, a short, quick answer. Question 7, calculate your BMI. Or if you would prefer to keep this private, you could calculate the BMI of a hypothetical person with a made-up height and mass or weight. So you don't have to give me any information you're not comfortable giving. Make up a height, make up a weight, and calculate the BMI. I just want to see that you can go through these calculations. And I did an example in 2 of the recorded videos. And if you wanted, I could go over an example at the end of me talking about this assignment if you want to see the calculation done in front of you, if you didn't get a chance to see it in the video. So 3 marks for a quick calculation, and you can even verify it. There's BMI calculators all over the place that will tell you the correct answer, but I want to see you actually use these numbers and do the calculation for me. What are the recommendations for weekly physical activity in terms of duration, frequency, and intensity? Well, this is one other thing that the textbook keeps emphasizing in every chapter. They always say, by the way, the Canadian Society for Exercise and Physiology recommends between X and Y minutes per week. I'm not going to give you the answer in this actual video. It's in all the other videos we talked about. And doing this at least however many times a week. They also recommend that you have A, B, or C levels of activity. I can tell you that one, moderate to vigorous physical activity. But for the rest of it, look up the data. It's in our textbook, it's in our notes, it's in our slides. All this stuff is given to you. And you're probably already remembering it from the stuff we've talked about. What are some examples of moderate or vigorous activity? Well, there's literally a table in one of the chapters, chapter 2, Basic Principles of Physical Fitness, which I've told you, that gives you some examples. I just want you to identify 2 examples of moderate and 2 examples of vigorous activity, because those might come into play for planning your exercise. So far, none of these things required you to go do external research or write a big thesis. It's just short written answers to stuff from our textbook. Then we have our fitness goals. As we talked about last class, I want you to identify 4 short-term goals and 4 long-term goals. This is annoying. There we go. That you have for your fitness program. For instance, a short-term goal, I say, is something you could achieve in the next couple of weeks or maybe a year. And this could be to bring my 1 rep maximum from 40 kilograms up to 50 kilograms or something like that. Or you might say, I would like to be able to run 1.6 kilometers in under 8 minutes. You're identifying a specific short-term goal that can be attainable within the year. And I'm going to give yourself a little reward for those. So let me go back to the preview mode. I might say, as I mentioned, be able to run 1.6 kilometers or roughly 1 mile in under 8 minutes. And the reward might be buy a new computer game. I think I used that example last class as well. If I'm able to do that, I'm going to reward myself for doing good exercise stuff. So you're giving yourself attainable goals and little rewards as a way of motivating yourself. Short and quick. And the second part is the same thing, just long-term goals. This is something that might be in the next couple of years or lasting throughout the rest of your life. For instance, I wish to reduce my risk of cardiovascular disease, which runs in my family. Something like this, long-term goal, identify 4 of them, you're done this section. And in each chapter, we focus on the different types of exercise. We talked about their benefits. You might have some of those as a benefit. You might want to get back into sports. So your long-term goal might be joining a hockey league or something and winning, a game or a tournament. Anything that's in the kind of longer term, a year or more, you can put down as a long-term goal. This section looks really big, but it's not really big. In the space below, briefly describe 3 specific changes you could make to your daily routine that would incorporate more physical activity. Think about things you do on a daily basis, daily or weekly basis, that could be modified so you're doing more physical activity, such as walking instead of using a vehicle. These 3 should be significantly different from each other, so make sure that they're 3 unique ideas, and make sure you describe what your current routine is for each and what you're changing. I'll give an example here. My change number 1 could be something like the following. Instead of taking the car to school, which I'm personally not doing because we're all working from home and I take the subway anyway, but instead of taking the car to school, I could walk to school instead, giving me, I don't know, let's say something like 3 kilometers of walking time each day, each weekday. Something like this is telling me this is my change. I normally take the car to school, but I'm going to make a change so that I'm going to walk to school, which will give me 3 kilometers of walking time each weekday. I'm explaining what I currently do and what I could do on something that is a daily routine, things that I'm doing almost every day. What's the relationship between here's a question in chat. What's the relationship among the 4 short-term goals and the 4 long-term goals? For this section here, short term, as long as it's something within a year, these are sort of specific goals. These might be a specific, as I mentioned, being able to run in under 8 minutes. Maybe it's being able to lift a particular weight. Maybe it's reducing your BMI from like 25.8 down to 24.9 or something. Short little specific goals that you could sort of target or reach towards. These are things that can be done within a year, and they're going to help guide your choices of activity. If all my goals here are focused more on cardiorespiratory endurance and overall health of my heart, I might have goals related to running. I might have goals related to cardiorespiratory endurance in other ways. Maybe I'm going to look at muscle endurance overall, or maybe I'm going to look at being able to run in a marathon that's happening in 6 months or something like that. Each of these, if I can do that, I can give myself a little reward. My long-term goals, these are why I'm doing the exercise in the first place. It's not necessarily a specific target that I'm aiming for, but I'm doing this because I want my heart to have better health, or I'm doing this to feel better about myself if it's related to my body composition, for example, or anything that's a goal that could either take a couple of years to attain or something I want to maintain for the rest of my life. So these will lead into the long-term goals. For instance, I wrote being able to run 1.6 kilometers in under 8 minutes. This is a cardiorespiratory endurance thing. It's also a muscular strength and endurance thing as well. And it's also going to improve my body composition. My long-term goal is to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, which exercises that improve my cardiorespiratory endurance, exercises that improve my body composition, those will help reduce my risk. So they can tie into those long-term goals, but it's to get you thinking about, why do I want to exercise? We've kind of been doing this each week when we talked about the health benefits, but here you're literally writing them as your goals. This is what I'm going to do with my fitness program. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And if there's anything I can clarify, I can go back and look at it again. So 3 changes to my daily routine. The next large batch of marks is basically just filling in that information in your table. I give you a page of instructions. Okay, good. Thank you. I give you a page of instructions for the 2 tables. First table is worth 10 marks. Second table is worth 6 marks. And you'll realize that that works out to 0.4 marks per section, labeling your specific exercises, checking off the appropriate components of exercise that it matches, checking off your planned frequency of these, indicating the intensity of each exercise, and the amount of time you would spend for each of the days you checked off. So mathematically, if this is 0.4 per row, so like 0.4, realistically, I'm just going to go through it and see if you missed any, and I'm going to subtract the marks, but 0.4 for each of these rows, and so on, 0.4 for each of these, 0.4 for each of these, 0.4 for each of these, and 0.4 for each of these, adds up to a total of 10. It does not add up to a total of 10. It's not 0.4. It's, how much did I say this is worth? All of a sudden, all my math is gone. 10 marks in total. There's 10 marks for, oh, it's going to be, I can't do the math right now. I don't know why my brain is fried from not getting sleep, but the marks are equally distributed throughout the table. I just can't think of the math right now, but it's not 10 marks. I did some math mistake. Let me just actually check this here. There's 25 things that I'm marking. In these 25 divided by 25 times 0.4. Yeah, that equals 10. I shouldn't doubt myself. I should have more confidence in myself. It's good for my mental health. So it adds up to 10. Basically, each row is worth 2 marks. 0.4, 0.4, 0.4, 0.4, 0.4. 2 marks. Same thing for the bottom table. Each row is worth 2 marks again. And it adds up to 6 marks in total. But all these tables are basically just filling in information for your exercises, checking that jogging would be, okay, since the thing is broken right now, I'll just use my check mark. Cardiorespiratory endurance, it works on muscle strength slightly, not as much as others, but I could mark it. Muscular endurance, flexibility slightly, body composition, sure. I could also do, I used this as the example last time, stretching. And stretching is really only working on flexibility. For jogging, I'm using my marker now because I broke these boxes and they're not working the way they should. But I could say I'm going to jog on Tuesdays and Fridays, something like that. I mark my intensity, getting my heart rate up to 160 BPM. I'm going to do it for 30 minutes on those days. You fill out this table, and I've made it so you do the exact same thing down here for your changes to daily routine. So that you can say, for example, walking instead of taking car, which is what I use as one of my example, walking to school instead of taking car. You don't have to describe the whole thing in here because you've already described it in detail here. But this is to get you acknowledging what amount of effort you're doing on each day. And I can say, I'm going to answer that question in a little bit. So walking is going to build up my cardiorespiratory endurance. Walking isn't very intense, so it's going to slightly build up my muscular endurance, maybe not my strength as much, my flexibility not as much. It's going to help my body composition. And I'm going to do that. I have classes on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, but I don't have classes Thursdays or Fridays. My intensity, if I'm walking to school, that's going to be relatively light activity. And it's going to take me, let's say 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back, 60 minutes of light activity in a day. So it's just seeing how much added physical activity you can get from these changes. And that all adds up. Any little bit helps. Having more physical activity rather than less is a benefit. That's what our textbook, and that's what the CSEP, I think, keeps talking about. So filling in this table, I have the instructions on this page, but you've seen me fill it in. Type of exercise, CRE is cardiorespiratory, MS, muscle strength, ME, muscle endurance, F, flexibility, BC, body composition. Filling in the frequency, how many days per week. Filling in the intensity, giving a specific goal such as BPM, where now I'm going to answer your question, or having a number of reps and sets, or describing it as moderate or vigorous. And finally, time, how many minutes per week. And then the whole thing repeats down here for the bottom table. How do we calculate BPM? Well, if you're using cardiorespiratory endurance and you want to have a sort of goal, a target BPM, that's where we can go back to our first page where I've scaffolded it to help you, where you're calculating your target range for your heart, which is taking your age subtracted from 220. In my case, I'm 37. 220 minus 37. I don't trust my own mental math. Equals 183. This is just an estimate. Where my maximum rate as recommended per my age, this is a huge estimate, but it's one that is used, is 183. So if I want to take 65% and 90% of my maximum heart rate, I can take 183 times 0.65, giving me 119 if I round up, or I can take 0.9 times 183, giving me 165, rounded up. Meaning my target heart range is between 119 to 165 BPM. And chapter 3 of our textbook is saying that if I want to have any benefits from the activity, I should get my heart rate somewhere within that zone so that I'm getting the cardiorespiratory endurance benefits. So it's actually a pretty straightforward calculation where you can get your target BPM. Hopefully that makes sense. In fact, the math in both of these cases are simple and won't take you more than a minute or two. For sure. While I'm doing math, I may as well do the BPM or the BMI as well. So the BMI calculations, there's two here, depending on if you know your height and mass in metric, or if you know it in imperial, in pounds, and height in inches. If I know my mass in kilograms and my height in meters, I'm going to make up some totals here. I might say, okay, 75 kilo. Actually, let me type it the way I would do this if I were answering this. I could say my BMI equals 75 kilograms divided by, and you don't have to worry about the formatting of the math, just show me the numbers. My height in meters, I'm around 175 centimeters or so, but we're just going to estimate it. No, I'm 184 centimeters. Let's use that. 184 centimeters is 1.84 meters squared. So I need 1.84 squared. Or if you know how to write this a little bit more, I could say BMI equals 75 kilograms. And I usually use a / for division because I teach a lot of math things. And I could say 1.84 to, let me see if Control-Shift+ works. Yes. You don't have to format it the way I just did, but because I know a keyboard shortcut to make a superscript, I could write it as squared. Now that equals 75. Ooh, I need to get rid of that. Kilograms divided by 1.84 squared is 1.84 times 1.84, or 3.3856. Technically, that's meters squared, but we're not going to worry about that too much. 75 divided by that number gives me 22.15, a BMI of 22.15. Or if I did it in pounds and inches, I could have done something similar. I could say, let's say I'm 180 pounds divided by, my height is 6 feet. So in inches, that would be 6 feet times 12 inches per foot. So 6 times 12 should give me 72. 72 squared, which equals 180 pounds. Oh, and at the end, this all has to be multiplied by 703. I go over the reason for that in the videos. It's because when we convert units, all the conversions equal this number 703. It's not a magic number. It's the unit conversions. So that equals 180 divided by, well, what's 72 squared? 72 squared is 5184 times 703. 180 divided by 5184 is 0.03472 times 703 is 24.4. So I use two different sets of measurements here, but you just need to use the one that you're familiar with, and you can go and verify it with an online BMI calculator. I just want to see that you do the calculation and you get your BMI. Remember, you don't need to use your actual BMI. If you want to keep it private, you can use a hypothetical person like I did. Neither of these is my current true weight or mass, and neither is a very accurate height. Well, this one is. I'm 6 feet tall. I know that you're not allowed to say you're 6 feet tall if you're 5'11" 3/4 or 5'11" 7/8 like I am, because then I'm like sub 6 feet tall, so I'm not allowed to claim to it. But come on, I'm 6 feet tall. And yeah, so the calculations aren't hard. Scrolling. So once you fill in this table, I'm basically looking to see that it makes sense. It looks balanced, at least towards your goals. If your goals focus on cardiorespiratory endurance, you might have more cardiorespiratory endurance and muscle endurance than some of the others. If your goal is just muscle strength, you want to be able to bench press, I don't know, 200 pounds or something, then you might have a focus on muscular strength and endurance, and maybe body composition or flexibility. So it depends on your personal program. I'll look through it. I'm basically just saying, yeah, you thought about it. The last 3 questions. What are some reasons that reducing sedentary work is useful, or reducing sedentary time is useful? Reducing sedentary time is useful. It's almost a tongue twister. Well, chapter 9 literally has a section talking about that. So give me 2 specific reasons why it's good to reduce sedentary time. Once again, a quick little answer. 14, what are 2 examples of tools or devices, equipment, assessment strategies, etc., that you could use to help monitor your progress throughout your plan? Once again, section 9.1, I believe, or later on in chapter 9, it has information on this. It says a section dedicated to tools that can help you monitor your performance. Heck, we talked about some of them last time. I talked about having actual physical tools like a Fitbit or a smartwatch. We talked about some of the assessments that we went through in the labs that assess our current ability. We talked about keeping track of your exercise journal with sets and reps and the maximum amount you could do. Any of those are examples of things that can help you monitor your physical activity. Leading to the very final question, which I mentioned, is what are the benefits of having a fitness buddy, someone that has read your fitness plan and can kind of keep an eye on you? Why would it be good to share your plan with someone else and have them around? And this you could talk about for any reasons that come to your mind. I don't want to give too many of them here. Why you might want to have a buddy, I guess, keeping tabs on you to make sure you're doing things. And that's it. There's a decent number of questions, but once you saw what these questions were, they're all much quicker than going to a website and entering all your ingredients and then getting your sort of recipe. Most of them come straight out of the textbook with the section given to you, and most of them can be written in a sentence or two per point. Once again, one thing I would recommend, and this is good for any of your courses, if you see an assignment and you see something like 3 marks and 4 marks, this gives you an idea of how much work you're showing. When you see 3 marks, you're thinking, okay, I've got to make at least 3 points there. If you make 4 marks, I should have at least 4 points. And in this case, it asks you 2 examples for moderate activity, 2 examples for vigorous activity. There's my 4 points there. So I try to design it so the marks that each question are worth give you a guide as to how much I'm expecting. Which is why for the questions at the end, let me just do page down, it's quicker. Even though you've got a lot of space to write them, they're only worth 2 marks, so I'm not expecting you to fill up paragraphs. I've just given you space to write it so that it's not cramped. Which recorded sessions to watch before attempting this assignment? Whichever needed. The recorded sessions cover body composition, cardiorespiratory endurance, muscular strength and endurance, flexibility, and body composition. Again, we did it as chapter 8 for weight management, and I think chapter 6, which was looking at body composition. Any of those would be good and helpful, but you don't need to watch them. Remember, those are always an optional component. If you're a person that likes to have someone going through the concepts with you, then you can watch them. But if you're reading the slides, reading the textbook in particular is useful, or looking over the previous assignments. In the previous assignments, I had labs. Those labs, for example, for I think it was assignment 2, there were a lot of tools and assessment strategies for checking and monitoring your progress in all of those different categories of fitness: cardiorespiratory endurance, muscular strength. It gave you a list of tools in those labs, so you could use those as ways of monitoring. So whichever ones are useful is the only answer. None of them are required. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you're a person that likes watching a video, you can take a look at them. So don't spend more than, it depends on your current level of English and writing skills. I would say don't spend more than 2 to 3 hours on this assignment. It's designed to be done in 1 to 2 hours. If you're a bit of a slower reader or slower writer, maybe 3 to 4. But in the end, it's worth 10%. 10% assignments usually have about 6 to 8 hours of work. So this is still good bang for your buck. You're going to get it done relatively quickly. And like I said, there's nothing here that requires external research. It's all just stuff from our textbook. So let me pop up the poll again to see if there's any questions about this assignment. And as I mentioned, the due date is going to be in 2 weeks or a little bit over 2 weeks. Once I see if I said something last week that I forgot about, I'm going to pick whichever is the later dates, either like the 8th or the 10th. I'm going to look at it. The other thing is our quiz 5 is going to be due next week towards the end of the week. I think I'll just make it due on the Friday because you asked nicely earlier. I'll extend that quiz. And I see 2 of 2 people have responded that they have no questions. I'm gonna leave this poll up just to see if there's anyone else there. I want to make sure there's no questions. When am I gonna post this assignment on Blackboard? Probably within about half hour. As you see right now, it's done, but the problem is there's a little formatting problems here and there, such as these annoying checkboxes. If I wanted to say that stretching does my flexibility, it marks all of those boxes and all of these boxes here. So the fix for me is going through every single one of these boxes needs to have a unique name. So I need to go through and give all of these, you know, how many boxes are there? Unique name. I have to go and label. Oh, I have a bunch more there, a bunch of boxes. Yeah, it's an annoying thing, but because I just got this almost done last minute before class, and it looked like it was good, but I just need to fix that part. Yeah, it's too many to label. That's why my plan was each of these are labeled like check 1, row 1 or whatever. And I was hoping when I copied it over, it would rename them, but it didn't. It just kept them the same. And it says, by the way, these are all the exact same data entry, but we don't have to worry about that. I'll fix it. So within a half hour of this class, I'm just going to go through and fix these things. I'm assuming that the one yes, was that the question? When is this going to be posted on Blackboard? I know one person said, yes, I have a question, and I'm going to type it in chat, but I wasn't sure if that was the one question. I'll run the poll one more time just to see if there's any remaining questions. If not, then we can take off. Okay, there's at least 3 of you here. The rest are, you know, listening in the background. I think I heard a microphone. Maybe it was just my ears hearing things again like I did earlier. Okay, so I'm going to end the session here. If you do have some questions you want to ask after, you can feel free to stick around. I will be here to help out. Aside from that, I'm going to try to get my recordings for the next 2 chapters up in the next few days. Again, optional if they're helpful to you. If not, reading the textbook and the slides should be good to cover it. I'll post announcements with updated due dates. Aside from that, everyone have a good week. And I will see you next week sometime. Take care. Let me end the recording.